ask that you please kindly turn them off during the duration of the service.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Greg. Greg Lindeman, he runs this joint. He's a great guy. And I appreciate all your help very much. Can you guys all hear me? Okay. How about now? No, I'm just kidding. Oh, I'm just kidding. All right. I want to say thank you. I'm utterly amazed that there is such a good crowd here today. People who knew and loved Hide and people who know and love me by virtue of Hide or just by myself, but knew that I had a Hide. And I don't think I can express with words how meaningful that is to me. I mean, truly. I know Hide touched people, and I know together we had experiences that impacted others, but when I see this, I realize that it's true. So it's really good. Thank you very much. Arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you. Thank you. I also want to encourage and thank those people who are online. You can't see them, but they have called in. We're doing a live stream because we have people from all over the world who also loved Hide and wanted to be a part of today. They are listening with us now. I don't know how many of you understand Japanese funerals. It's not like you run to Google to look it up, but these things at the top here of this curtain are kind of important for us today, and I'm going to explain a little bit about them. The rope is called shimenawa, and what that means is it's a sacred rope. And it's a sacred rope that does a couple cool things. It separates that which is sacred and holy from everything else in the world, right? That's a good thing. It marks those boundaries. And also those boundaries help to protect us from evil spirits, protect Hide. One of the things associated with this sacred rope are virtues. And for those of you who are students of Japanese history, 8,000 years of history, these things have been around for a long, long time, and they have great, great meaning, even in modern Japan today. And the reason I want to share these virtues with you is because I feel like they describe Hide perfectly, for those of you who know him. So I'll just read them to you. The first is acceptance, wonder, engagement, activation, intensity, that's a big one, and playfulness. All of those things, I feel, were embodied in Hide. That's kind of who he was. He could be up in your face, or he could be rolling around on the ground, laughing his head off with you. But either way, he was committed to that virtue, that value in that moment at that time. So I think that was pretty cool when I found that out. The other thing that the shimenawa represents is the journey. Okay, life is a journey, right? You don't get to one spot and just stop. Well, I hope you don't anyway. You don't get to one spot and just stop. It's all about the journey and everything that happens to you on the way, right? Getting from here to there, right? And there is a lovely haiku that I'd like to share with you that I think represents this. Shiawase wa tabisaki de naku, michinaka ni. So you know haiku is the syllables, right? And what that means is that happiness, you can't find it in some spot, in some town, in a book, or it's not a static thing, right? It's actually right here in front of every single one of us today, right now, right in front of us, on the road that each of us is traveling in our lives. And I feel like for Hide, that was something he lived. He made that real. And sometimes it was very annoying, if I'm honest. But most of the time, it was awe-inspiring. And I think you'll agree with me there. The other thing you see up here are the white streamers. Those are called shide, and they're zigzag paper streamers. I made them myself. Thank you very much. They are symbols of purity, okay, and they're often used in purification rites. But they're also called receptacles for the gods, for kami. Kami is the Japanese word for God or gods. So they come and spend time with us when we create this space. It's a time for them to come and bless us, watch over us, make sure that Hide's journey continues in the way that it's supposed to, and that he's safe and doing well. They also, when you look at them individually, they look a little bit like lightning. And lightning represents rain, and rain represents harvest. So they also can be representative of continuous growth and fulfillment, which I also think is apt. These white banners, this shide, they help to connect the world of the gods to our world right now while we honor Hide today. So the rope and the banners are very, very specific to Japanese culture, and I wanted to make sure that we had them here today and that you guys understood why they were here today. I think that's pretty much it. I'd like to play an audio now that we got from two of Hide's very good friends from Columbia University. They are Helen and John, and I'm wondering, Marilyn, can we play that? Lee, can we play the audio media? I want to play a lovely greeting that was sent. They made a lovely recording, and I want them to be able to share that with us. And while we're waiting for that, I will tell you a little story about Hide. I have so many. One of the things that struck me about Hide was his incredible curiosity. He was one of the most curious people I'd ever met, and nothing could stop him from asking a question. The first time that I experienced that sort of in a funny way was he was in the United States with me in Rochester, New York, and my brother David, who is a college, university football referee, we were watching Monday Night Football, and David was explaining the rules to Hide. Defense, offense, here's what you do, here's how you gain yards, here's how you score, all of this, and Hide's watching with great intent. But he was curious about the team that had the ball, the offense, and so his question was, so how often do they offend? And my brother went, what? You mean the offense. But I mean, he's trying to put it all together, right, in a language and a culture that isn't his. But that's actually a very good question. And I thought it was brilliant. And we laughed and laughed about it for years after that. The other thing that time when something like that happened was, one time he was in an Uber coming home from a job, and the driver was from Iraq. And he was questioning the driver, and they were talking about the difference between living in Iraq and living in the US, and this notion of freedom of speech and being able to speak your mind, right? And this gentleman was telling Hide about all the terrible things that happen to people in Iraq, even today, modern times, to folks who want to talk about their dreams or who want to do things that are perceived as being against the Islamic order or whatever it is that's on their mind. They are not free to speak. And Hide's sort of takeaway from that, of course, is that freedom of speech is not a given. So we need to be thankful every day that we have it in this country. And secondly, in order to defend it, you must put on a suit of armor because you will need that. It is a battle. And that was the first thing he told me when he got home from that ride. Not, hey, honey, I'm home, but that story. He was that kind of guy, I have something I have to tell you. This was incredible. And I was like, okay, let's listen, So, Greg, are we ready for the audio?
We are, yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead and listen to that, please. Two of his, those two of his friends from Columbia University, where he did his first master's degree, he had two, both done in English, I might add. And he had a lot of help with typing papers and editing. You know, I'll just leave that for you to ponder. But I do want to reemphasize how important it is that you guys are here for both him and me. He would be super, super pleased. Hide was larger than life, okay? He was a huge presence. When he entered a room, you knew it. The energy changed. There was a shift. And now that he's gone, there is a larger than normal hole. There's a space that has to be filled, or at least should be taken good care of in his absence. We did not expect Hide to die. He had just started his 4th treatment. The other 3 didn't do what we had needed them to do. We were very hopeful that this 4th treatment would work, but it did not, unfortunately. Hide passed away on Friday morning, May 3rd, in my arms, with me talking to him and loving him and kissing his beautiful skin and rubbing that beautiful bald head. I know that he knew I was there because he was crying. He started to cry. He couldn't respond, but that was his way of showing me he could hear me, hear the things that I was saying. And so we cried together until he took his last breath. And that's when I howled. At the top of my voice, I just howled because that was all I could do at that moment. The good news was that he was no longer suffering and he was no longer in pain. The journey with this cancer had been not a good one, and he had really suffered. What's left is the pain and suffering that rests on us now, those who knew and loved Hide deeply and utterly, like myself. And I would tell you, and those of you who know him know I'm not lying here, he would want us to look for the possibilities in this scenario. He would want us to look for possibilities to create something new. And you know that in Asian cultures, there's often this thinking that in a crisis, you should always be looking for the opportunity, for the possibility. What good can come from this, right? And that's kind of how he lived and what he trained me to do. It took a while, but we got it done, you know. The opportunities that are ahead of us now, it's up to us to be creative in curating the space that he left, the hole that he left, and make something good, whole, and beautiful in it. And at this point, what I'd like to do is I'd like to invite each one of us to, one at a time, come up, light incense, say something to Hide, and only you will know what that is, but I'm sure he was listening carefully. And then once you've lit your incense sticks, you place them in the sand, okay? So I'm gonna go first, and Shayang is gonna go second, and then I would like Scott and Darius to go in that order, and then everyone else can go one at a time after that. Is that okay? Ça va? You're supposed to say, oui, ça va. Okay? All right, me first. So you like them? And you place them. Very easy. So while we're doing this, I'm going to continue telling you some cool things about Hide, or funny things about Hide. When we were first living in New York, I had looked to join an adventure group, sort of a hiking club, and they were called Wild Earth Adventures. For Japanese people, that hard R is very difficult. And one night when I was in the kitchen making dinner, Hide said, I heard him say, I had my back to him, I heard him say, well, what happened at the meeting for Wild Ass Adventures? And I turned around and I went, excuse me? He goes, you know, Wild Earth Adventures. And because for him to be able to pronounce it, it didn't come out earth, it came out ass. And I thought he said Wild Ass Adventures, which it might as well have been. But we had so many moments like that where the two of us would just crack up because, you know, it didn't come through in translation, if you will. So anyway. You know, you don't have to wait. You can come. Come and line up. Come and come. Come and come. Yeah, come on through. Let's go. There are 2 candles. There you go. Go ahead, Bob. Anyone else? Please come. Please come. Just be careful here. Be careful. Yeah, okay. I don't want you to trip. Beautiful. Thank you. Feel free. If Hida were here, he'd say, where are you sitting? Come on, let's go. Efficiency, efficiency. That was another one of his taglines. Funny guy. But I will tell you that Hide did have a distinct philosophy of life. And he actually put it on his Facebook page, but I thought it was very cool because he and I had talked about it a lot when we first met. And I'll just sort of paraphrase it here. His belief or his philosophy was that you need to become friends with people who are not your age, who are in a different age group. You need to hang out with people whose first language isn't the same as your first language, and then try to have that conversation, right? You need to get to know people who don't come from your same social class, and it hurts me to say that they are still classes in our societies, no matter where you go in the world, but it is a fact. But it's important to get to know people at all levels, really, to understand where they're coming from. It helps a great deal. And said, doing these things is helping you to see the world the way it really is. That's when you have information you can work with. You don't have to assume, right? You can ask, you can know. And that was part of his charm and part of his magic, was that he never stopped asking, never stopped seeking. You know, he was very curious in that way. Oh, that looks great. One of the other things that Hide had on his Facebook page, which I thought was pretty funny and I knew was intended for me, was that the word listen, because you know Japanese people often use silence as a method of communication, the word listen contains the same exact letters as the word silent. I think that was, honey, I don't want to tell you to shut up, but here's something that's interesting, you know. So. There you go. I'm sure most of you have heard of Lao Tzu. He was a Chinese person of ancient times who wrote about all kinds of things. But one of the things he said that I thought was absolutely beautiful, and then interestingly, I actually found it in Hide's things, was that being deeply loved by someone gives you strength, and I can attest to that. Being deeply in love with someone gives you courage, and I also can attest to that. Yeah, you're good. Just be careful. Yeah, don't burn yourselves. And you can put the sticks close together. That's perfectly okay. Many of you got a chance to go through the slideshow several times over while we were waiting to start this international live stream. And you noticed that there were paintings and references to all kinds of things. You know, him becoming a US citizen, for example, the Yankees, which Hide loved. He loves baseball, but all kinds of things, opera. He was telling me that on his last CT scan, actually his last MRI, the noise in an MRI is quite loud if you've never had one, and it can be quite disconcerting. But the people who were running the MRI for him asked him what kind of music he would like, and he said opera, and they put it on, and he felt like he had been transformed. He said, even in the darkest moment, when I'm sick and I cannot stand on my own, and I have to have this terrible MRI to see if the lymphoma has entered my brain, I had moments of absolute beauty listening to that opera. And that reminds me of a beautiful saying from actually Goethe. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. A man should hear a little music, read a little poetry, and see a fine picture every day of his life, in order that worldly cares may not obliterate the sense of the beautiful which God has implanted in the human soul. And I can tell you that after working in international finance throughout all of Asia with all the different personalities and cultural obstacles and finance sort of profiles, people who are not necessarily warm and fuzzy, Hide never lost sight of who he was. He never lost sight of his center, and he practiced this. He practiced this on a daily basis. It was very, very important for him. And when I saw it, I went, oh my God, that's so Hide. Confucius said, everything has beauty, but not everyone sees it. I feel like Hide was one of those magic people who could see it. He could see beauty in everything and often spoke about it. And people would be like, what? But he was able to explain, which I thought was really cool. Whether it stuck with those people or not, it doesn't really matter. I think the fact that he was able to do it was kind of a superpower. So, Ralph Waldo Emerson said, live in the sunshine, swim in the sea, drink the wild air. Hide did all of those things. I think most of you know that he's from Japan, but he was from a very small island, very far south, 3 hours south of Tokyo by plane. The name of the island is Ishigaki Jima. Jima means island. So Iwo Jima just means Iwo Island, right? And when he was a kid, he and his brother used to dive because people would be pearl farming, right? They would dive and screw everything up because, you know, they had nothing better to do. And they were little boys. So, but I just thought that was so cool because he can't live anywhere where there isn't water. Like if we were to live in Arizona or Nebraska maybe or somewhere like that, he would never make it. We live right 1 block from Lake Michigan. In New Jersey, we were right next to the ocean. In Abidjan, next to the ocean. In Lagos, next to the ocean. Ishigaki is surrounded by water. He had to have the water. That was a life force for him. And I just thought that was so cool. You know, he used to get into trouble. That was taken care of by his grandfather, who, when he would come home every day and there would be reports of him being in fights at school, his grandfather said, let's take that energy and rechannel it. And so he started taking kendo. And for those of you who know, kendo is the art of fighting with the sword, right? Hide became a black belt and was pretty intense, but he was so good at it. He did. He found a way to channel all that angst and all that anger and all that little boy stuff, energy, and he became an expert kendo master. So there you go. Who knew? Thank you all for participating in that. I'm going to ask some people to come up and share some stories. And you don't need to have prepared things. If you did, that's great. If you didn't, that's also great. All you need to do is speak from the heart. So, Xiaoyang, would you be willing to be first? And then Scott, maybe you can go after that.
In my heart, Hide holds a special place as a remarkable influence on my son Cyrus and our entire family. His presence was a blend of joy and enlightenment, profoundly shaping our perspectives and experience. I vividly remember how he once lifted Cyrus into the air as a baby, his laughter echoing around, instilling a lightness and joy that fills the room. Hide's deep connection to his Japanese roots enriched our lives, sparkling curiosity and admiration for culture steeped in beauty and tradition. His influence was so profound that it evenly led Cyrus to innocently ask, "Why aren't we Japanese?" A testament to the significant impact of Hide's culture heritage on our family. An art lover with an exceptional eye, Hide saw the world differently. He had a rare ability to transform what many would overlook into something beautiful, turning the mundane into masterpiece, showcase his creativity and resourcefulness. His approach to art was a reflection of his philosophy towards life, finding value and beauty in the overlooked and underserved. Beyond art, Hide cared deeply about global issues, engaging with both politics and science with a passion that were both inspiring and contagious. His broad interests and thoughtful conversations added depth to our gatherings, making every interaction with him enriching and memorable. Today, as we remember Hide, we celebrate not just the moments he shared with us, but the lasting impressions he left on our lives. His legacy of creativity, cultural appreciation, and intellectual curiosity continues to inspire us all. Thank you, Hide, for the laughter, wisdom, and perspectives you shared so generously. Your spirit lives on in every piece of art we see and in every question we pondered around the world, about the world. Thank you.
All right, first of all, I am so thankful to be here with you today. If nothing else, I really need this opportunity to say goodbye. So I appreciate it, and thank you for sharing this with me. I am one of the team in place 6, and you heard from 2 of us in the opening video, And I also want to acknowledge Rita and Darius, who are from that Team and Place time. Team and Place, for those who don't know, is in Nothing Street in New York with a terrible old Rickey apartment building that was right over a subway line that shook like earthquakes were passing in the middle of the night and all through the night, and that we loved dearly because we had the chance for the fellowship with each other. So it bound us together for a long time, and I think for all of us, Team and Place means a lot. And this is the first time we've had to say goodbye to something from Team and Place. You know, in 1990, I was a very unconfident new master's student. I didn't feel I belonged. I went to Columbia University and I was to study an international affairs program, and I thought, oh, super. I've been to Africa. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Africa, right? I'm gonna meet Africans here. And so I did. I met Hide. You know, perhaps it was the constant reference to his culture. Maybe it was the way that he greeted you and actually saw you when he did. I don't know why, but Hide was my African. There was something electric and welcoming about this tall, handsome, loquacious guy. Something so magnetic and effortless. And so I found myself transported into the realm of Hide. What was that? What was Hide's realm? The first thing to make clear is that Hide could be very open, but he was also about mystery. He told stories about his time working with the Japanese government that were punctuated by the absence of any detail whatsoever. When I asked him for these details, he would just look at me knowingly and tell me that he was not allowed to even whisper them. He told me if I knew, I would be kidnapped, taken to black sites, and tortured. So that part of Hide's life will forever remain in my imagination. It is a murky world of rescues, close calls, and escapes, James Bondness, with no real facts to build a story and piece together the narrative. But, you know, he did tell me some secrets, usually after a week or two of dropping hints and making me beg. I cannot tell you these secrets. I'm sorry. If I did, well, I wouldn't be responsible for what happens next. When I think of Hide, I'm reminded of the title of Milan Kundera's novel, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. He was both. I do mean the unbearable part, too. He could be light and airy, especially if he was around kids or dogs. Then he melted like the tundra and relented into the many shapes of goofiness. But he also always bore the weight of the knowledge of good and evil. Hide believed that every action had consequences. For him, there was always a right way to do things. In the Team and Place apartment, Hide started every day by filling the electric rice maker so that every evening would greet us with perfect Asian rice. You couldn't have a meal without rice, of course. We had a lot of it. One day, Rita and I, we decided to make rice pudding with some of the mountains of leftover rice. A little sugar, a little milk, and voila, delicious rice pudding. We were proud of ourselves. When Hide came home, he was alarmed. You cannot mix milk with rice. He said, why would you ruin good rice? This is so against my culture. I have a picture in my mind from our university Facebook. This is the old type of Facebook, you know, it came printed out with square pictures of everybody. Everyone in their picture, the American students, of course, you know what we were doing. We all had these big smiles on our face and, you know, we're about to conquer the world. Well, not the Japanese students and not Hide. Oh my God, you looked at his picture, it was foreboding. It was the picture of someone who wanted to kill you. But that was Hide too. Hide had the mind for the right moment for everything and everything the right moment. And it was about being professional, and it was about responding to the world. All the conformist elements of Japanese society just busting with energy. I have many favorite moments with him. In the last decades, I have mostly seen him on short trips. But over the last week, I have been amazed at how deeply connected my friends and family felt to him. Hide knew all my family, I think better than I did. He knew my Colorado family. He knew my New Jersey family. He knew my North Carolina family. He knew my distant cousins in Texas. He knew my ancient cousins in New York. He knew us all, and my friends, right? How can that be? How can that be? Every single one of them remembered him. In fact, I have a friend who met him once, who just wrote a paragraph on Facebook this morning about how important Hide was. And that's who he was. He touched. It didn't need to be a long time. It didn't need to be a deep discussion. He touched people. But I have to tell you about this trip that Hide took to Leadville, Colorado. And I don't know if everyone here knows Leadville. It's high in the Colorado mountains. It's the highest town in the US, and it's cold. And Hide was there one winter with my family and I. It was cold. We were stuck in the hot house, and everyone decided to do what was totally natural to us. Let's go ice skating. Hide was panicked. No, he said, you go. I don't know how to ice skate. But we pressed him. We made him go. You'll learn. Come on, Hide. What kind of kendo master are you who's afraid of a little ice? And he relented. What happened is a cerebral film I shall never forget. Imagine ice skate wearing Hide, standing, shivering, tall, Japanese, proud, and straight as an arrow in this rough outdoor rink crowned by the pure white sides of mountain pinks and old Victorian painted ladies. Those are the houses. He just stood there in the middle of the rink with his ice skates on. A tall tree, not moving, just stood there. And all around him, there were the blur of skaters going around in circles, and Hide just stood there. And if you watched him, after a moment, he decided, I can do this. You could see that dawn in him. I can do this. And he picked up a foot, and he started to move forward. And of course, you know what happened. Whack! On the ice. The whole edifice came crashing down. I was about to run over and help him and so forth and so on, and feeling guilty, of course, because I knew we'd forced him to go. But a miracle happened. Over a dozen young girls, from the age of maybe 8 to 16, gathered around him instantly. I don't know where they came from, but obviously they'd been watching him. And they lifted him up. They grabbed his arms. They pushed their jackets against his sides to make him stable and waited until he was stable again and caught his breath. And then proceeded to spend the next 2 hours accompanying him around and around the rink, holding his hand, telling him how to skate, giving him instructions. At the end of the day, a flushed, exuberant, and triumphant Hide proclaimed, "I did it! I did it!" And those girls, oh my, they are great. Aren't they great? The point is that Hide could be so professional and so serious and so important, but Hide was also able to take instructions from a group of young girls he'd never met before. And he totally fit in. He may have had a lot of pride, but he also had that openness. I'm not sure anyone's ever had such a good time skating, honestly. And all the same, accepted gracefully the help that came to them. If you had told him in advance, I do not think he would have chosen to learn from 10-year-old skaters. But he later told me it was perfect. Their center of gravity makes them great skaters. It's really normal to define the categories and name the forces of nature that come into our lives. What was Hide for me? I really have no words, but yeah, I can put a lot of names on it. A great friend, a brother, a confidant, a critic. You know, life has a way of coming together in ways that can't be predicted. Hide is the Africa I was looking for. Someone I could never fully understand, someone with a mind of their own, someone who bridged and transcended culture, someone who was always surprising, someone who outshone me, but had the grace to come down to my level. How does one do justice to that? In the last year, Hide was crushed by the pain of his disease, and thank you, Suzanne. I really appreciate your telling us, giving us that window into that. I felt as everyone does at these times when I talk to him, I felt my helplessness. What could I say? How can you count the days? How can you help someone for something you can't understand? For Hide, the one thing I did understand is that his mind could trap him. I'd seen him do it before. I'd seen him get obsessed by something that was outside of his control. Suzanne, I think, was his better self in that way. I can imagine her calm, practical, taking it a step at a time, saying, Hide, we'll see. We don't know yet. We'll see. On one call, Hide recounted everything he knew about his diagnosis. He was calculating the days, the chances, his worries and his sadness, and he was scared. He was very scared. Hide, I asked him, what is it that you really care about? How can you focus on the now? Hide thought about it. And gradually, he remembered himself, someone who loved beauty, his wife, his dog, I'm not sure which more. Being in the world, breathing in and truly living every moment. Yes, he said, he could do this. He could face this. He could love deeply, live now, live this time now, realizing he so much wanted to be in this world with all of us. In that way, I think, and maybe I'm telling myself this, but I think Hide will always be with us. He reminded me of the value of grace, the way in which we can embrace and love every moment we have, in which we, fragile and small as we are, stride forward and really see everyone. and everything we can. So I admit it. It feels to me now that an important part of the world has been torn away, and I think it's interesting Suzanne used the same metaphor. I know it's gone, but it's also kind of there. And I am really thankful for having shared this time with Mr. Yamakawa. I know I can never replace it.
Yeah, I'll just like to, sorry. I think it's going to be too hard. Okay, maybe I can come up with it.
I will say that there is one aunt from Colombia that have two incredibly beautiful children who Hide and I became very close to and who we love and can't wait to see.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bob. And I met Hide 16 years ago when he moved into our building. And I loved him right from the start. He was so wonderful. He was kind. He was thoughtful. He was cheerful, always friendly, very, very thoughtful. And I really enjoyed knowing him as a friend and a neighbor. I know that he also had very deep feelings and thoughts all the time. And although I know this last year was difficult for him and he suffered a lot, I know that this present life has completed itself for him. I know that he is free and he's happy. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am Adriana. Thank you, Suzanne, for putting this beautiful ceremony together. I met Suzanne and Hideo with a dog, with Bo, because I also have a small dog. So our dogs became friends at the park. And year passed by, and we always met there and chit-chat. And then around COVID came, and then Suzanne and Hideo told me, oh, we are moving back to New Jersey because the world is shutting down. We need a bigger space. Few months pass by, and then I see them back to Chicago, walking by the park. I said, what happened? Oh, we are thinking coming back because Bo, the dog, is not very happy over there, and we miss the city. So so I'm always going to miss Hideo because I remember like him like walking the dog with or without Suzanne. As you said, we don't know if he loved more Suzanne or the dog. But I will always miss him like walking the dog, Bo, and that beautiful and big smile. Like I could see far away. I said, oh, that's Hideo with the dog.
So we also know him from the park with our dog. And Hide loved Leo. And kind of a funny story. Yes, one time Amy and I, we went back to Taiwan for 2 weeks. So my brother took care of Leo. And then we came home, and my brother's like, oh, I met some Japanese guy in the park that knew Leo. So just to say how friendly he was and talk to new people. He talked to my brothers. Now my brother knows Hide as well. So he will be missed.
So, the dogs, Indiana has a little dog named Harry, and Peter and Amy have a dog named Leo, and Bo is friendly with both of those dogs, but she's more friendly with these people too. So they created a wonderful circle of love and dog worship. Nelson?
So I knew Hide from working with him for 10, 12 years. And him and I traveled Asia together for weeks at a time. So I'm going to echo what a lot of people said. He is a mysterious guy. And we would, when we would land in a whatever country it was, usually in the hotels they have like a meet and greet for the guest and all that, and you have a cocktail and all that stuff. And we'd sit there and have a cocktail and hors d'oeuvres. And Hide was always I'm going to echo it, I can't remember who said it, but a mysterious guy. So the one time I was sitting there with him, and somehow we got on the conversation that, hey, I was held hostage. I go, you were held hostage? I go, why didn't you ever tell me that? He goes, you never asked. So I go, what happened? So he tells me about he was in a coup in the Philippines, and I'm going to mess this up, and that he was in a hotel, and it didn't hold Americans, so the Philippine government didn't really care. And the terrorists came in and took the hotel and basically was held hostage. He says, oh yeah, they had gunships and they were shooting in. I said, what happened? He goes, and you probably know the story better than I do. He said for a long time, him and his father were not speaking. And it was because he had left Japan. And since he was the first son, and there was a long generational history with the first son being there was a break in the relationship. He said at that point, he picked up the phone and he called his father to let him know, like, Dad, this might be the last time I speak to you. I'm in the middle of a coup. I said, well, what did your father say? He goes, what's a coup? So that's Hide. So, yeah, and the one thing about Hide is, and if you travel Asia, you quickly realize that there's a long history of these countries conquering each other. There's this underbelly of, kind of animosity between, different countries. And so a Japanese individual, say visiting China or one of these countries, may not be accepted. Everyone loved Hide. And whenever I called Hide, the first thing I'd say, Hide! Because that is Hide. And even when I texted him, I would write Hide, 5 exclamation marks, and he knew what that meant. So Hide! But he was a great human being. And he, again, I don't know who said this, but he knows my entire family. My son is here because my son and my daughter, she's in North Carolina. But as soon as, the message came out, I let her know. So I'm going to share some stories she told me from friends of hers who knew Hide. So one is from me. I don't know if you know me. So me worked with Hide. And yeah. And so me shared the story, and I thought it was funny that, when we worked at PPM together, you have to do these headshots for clients, et cetera. And she says, yeah, Hide was really sure to speak to the photographer to make sure all the wrinkles were taken out. He said he wanted to look like he was 25. And then Ashley Sofa, I don't know if you know Ashley, she says that, and this goes to Hide's professional side and how intent he was and focused on his work. So when he was leaving PPM, they wanted to throw a go-away party for him. And so they put it on a calendar, and he got the calendar invite, and he wrote, maybe. So that's Hide. But that is Hide. So, and we kept in touch over the years, and while we worked and after work, and we would have lunch together. And and when he got ill, I tried to make sure that he knew that he had a support system, and I had him reach out to my sister-in-law who had gone through the same thing. And so, you're not alone, and hopefully, sharing this helps everyone here. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. That was so good right there. My name is Pam. Suzanne and I worked together 10 or 15 years ago. You will probably know the number. I do not, but 10 or 15 years ago. And we worked in a creative agency, and it was always a fun environment. We were surrounded by Happy Meal toys, and Happy Meal packaging, and all of that. And so that's how I met Hide, was coming into the marketing store offices. And I remember we had these tables that, being the creative agency, you could write on them with dry erase markers. And it was really fun to have a meeting and you could sit down and write notes. And so Hide came in, he was at a time in his career where he was looking for something new. And we looked at his resume together. I was in HR, and my world is interviewing and resumes. And we just talked about his background and these stories. And so that's really how I met Hide, was going through his background, his life stories, and where he wanted to go next in his career. And he was wonderful. We became Facebook friends, whatever that means, but loved seeing his pictures, loved seeing his stories and his love and joy for life. So thank you for sharing him with us.
Thank you for having us out. My name is Jeff, and my partner Mark and I are friends and neighbors of Suzanne and Hide. So I just want to say thank you for putting all of this together. I mean, this is a good way that we can say our goodbyes to Hide and find a way to move through that next chapter. So and thank you all of you for being here too. I think that this helps all of us. So. I wish I could come up with a good story like what everybody else has so far, but my experience with Hide, the thing that I think I'm going to see the first and what I've already started to see is we share a staircase together, just going up and down that, and just chance encounters, running into him in the backyard and seeing him. But we sort of had a routine. I'd be up and down those stairs multiple times a day. And just to see him there, sometimes he's carrying both, sometimes he's not. And just having that time together, sometimes we would stand there and chat, but other times it was just sort of a nod and continue on. But so that it's a presence that I don't feel that in the same way anymore, and it's something that's noticeable. And so it's going to take time to move through that. But having this time here together at least is a good way. I'm glad that we're here together. So.
He loves you. He thought you were one of the smartest people he ever met.
Oh.
And Mark's live in our condo building, and they are upstairs neighbors to us, and they have been there for some time, and so we got to know them very, very well. And Jeff served on our board for a while, and Hide would, every time we had a board meeting, would remark how incredibly smart you were, and how you always asked the right questions, and how you always went and got the answers. Because he was Mr. Do it right or don't do it at all. But he thought you were just incredible.
Well, thank you, and that's another thing too. I think it's a perfect example, actually, of he was always very encouraging towards me and towards my partner Mark too. We were there in the building. There's many philosophies that I think we aligned on closely, and he was very encouraging to us to ask questions, and exactly to that point of you follow the right path, follow the ethical route and things. So I'm really glad that I had a chance to get to know him, and but thank you.
Does anybody else have a crazy story they'd like to tell? Please, Stephen, please, that'd be great.
Hi, I have a short story. I'm a neighbor, and one day I met Hide, and we began talking, and somehow it came out the fact that for me, a mystical writer has meant much of I'm a journalist, and much of my career was Lafcadio Hearn. And I shared that with Hide, and all of a sudden, it was like I was talking to a man who was a child. And I said, well, how do you know? Because I knew all of Lafcadio Hearn was a writer from Greece, the US, and settles in Japan, and then he becomes the first translator of Japanese fairy tales. He was a mystical person, and I sort of believe in what he does is every letter is a person, and they sort of look certain ways, but he was the most fantastic translator at the end of the 19th century. And I tell Hide about my love of Lafcadio Hearn. I've chased his books down, and I loved them so much. And I said, how do you know the stories? And I said, do you know the story of? And he did. He said, that was my childhood. And so we had that bond. And if I'm correct, when his days were coming to an end, you read to him. And I searched among the books I had collected. And I want to affirm he was a man of curiosity and eagerness, and that we shared that from such different backgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. You gave the most beautiful rendition of life with Hide, a life that I find myself very jealous of you. And I know he wasn't perfect. Nobody is. But that's the epitome of who I look for. I don't look anymore, but you know what I'm saying. So I met Hide vicariously through my son, Scott, who was going to Columbia, and it was Christmas time. And I had just come through a rather bad time in my life. And I had just gotten a job in downtown Aurora, Colorado, which I don't know, most of you don't know about, but it has a bad reputation, especially at that time. And I had left my daughter with friends up in the mountains, where I had just left living in a cabin, 100-year-old cabin that was left in my family that was no running water, no electricity, but a great school. And Scott called. He was coming home for Christmas, and he said, can I bring a friend? Well, yeah, you may. So I was living in a hooker motel. It was the least expensive accommodation that I could afford, and a new job that I desperately needed. But it had, it had a little living room and a bedroom and kind of kitchen facilities, but it was a long time gone. It was really squirrely. So, but it worked for me. I went to work, I came home, nobody bothered me. Melissa came home after school, it was over, and we got a tree, and we decorated the tree, put it in the little living room, and found something that Hide and Scott could sleep on. And Scott sent me out to the airport. I don't remember names. You could be the most famous person in the world, and I might forget your name, but I'd remember your face. So I had to pick Hide up first because he came in from New York, and Scott came in an hour later. So he told me he's this Japanese guy, Okay, Mom, I'm going to help you remember his name. And I just love this because I never forgot it. Hidemasa Yamakawa. Now, he's come up with an even better one. I'm surprised he didn't sing it. But that worked for me. But I went to pick up Hide, and I couldn't find him. Melissa and I both, we looked and looked, couldn't find him. So I picked up Scott, and I said, I'm sorry. I hope he's still around. I couldn't find him. We went right over there, and there he was standing there. Scott said, well, Mom, there he is. And I looked like this. Oh. It really shows where there's a prejudice and you don't have a clue that you've got it. But in Los Angeles, I really never knew any Japanese people personally. But in Los Angeles, down on Hollywood Boulevard, there were lots of Japanese tourists. They were all tiny. So, all right, so we have this, this Christmas at the Hooker Hotel. I guess somebody knocked on the door at 3 o'clock in the morning. Scott was shocked. Oh my God, it was this woman that wanted to know if she could help us. Hide was cool with that. He was cool. He never said a word about those kind of accommodations. Of course, I had no idea what his life had been like. I didn't even know he knew UI then. And then we took him up to the mountains. My father owned this house in Leadville. And afterwards, my father, who was, I don't know, Scott, 75? Somewhere in there, maybe closer to 80, said, you know what a nice guy. I really liked him. Of course, I didn't understand a word he said. But it was the intention that Hide put out. I knew him vicariously mostly. He called me Mom, which I just have to tell you just made me feel like $1 million. I guess maybe that's a Japanese custom to call their friend's mother's mom, but that isn't how I took it. I took it to heart. But I wish we'd lived next door. I wish that I could have learned the many things that I know, but learn to see it in action. He is the epitome of your description and what little I know of a Japanese gentleman from all my readings. I would like so much not to be what I think maybe the women might be, because I think I never really bonded with that. But he's going to make sure I get it. I know that. And thank you so much, Suzanne.
Thank you all for your comments and your stories. He was something else. Oh my gosh. Those were so heartwarming and loving, and I'm, whoops, spilling things already. There's no alcohol in this, it's just water. For those of you who don't know, Hide's name, Yamakawa, means mountain river. So when you say Fujiyama, you're just saying Fuji Mountain, okay? But the other part of his name, Hidemasa, the way he described it to me is like a warrior who is victorious in battle, a warrior who, help me with this, Cheyenne, courage, a courageous person, a hero, and conquered, but he does it with, he conquers with peace or with language or with, no? Not coming? He used to say that it meant English conqueror, and I kind of got the feeling that wasn't exactly true, and I later found out it was not exactly true. But the idea here is that he came from a very small town. I came from a very small town. He came from a family that had real challenges, divorced parents, stepmother, all the drama and angst and anger and resentment that comes with that in situations where that occurs. This tiny little island called Ishigaki, and he made his way to 2 master's degrees in English, one at Columbia, you've probably heard of it, it's a pretty good university. The other one is London Business School, also, not a schlock school, pretty good school. He was so determined to make himself, to grow into, and I'm going to use your word epitome, grow into the person that he had envisioned. I can do this, and he did it. Another cute, funny story about him, we had a friend visiting from Copenhagen, Denmark, who we had met in West Africa, and who was visiting us in New York City, and he was like, oh, we got to go to the Empire State Building. And those of you who know New York know where the Empire State Building is. I had to walk by it every day on my way to work and home. Hide insisted that he knew which building it was. He had lived in New York much longer than I had. Come to find out, what he thought was the Empire State was actually something else. Chrysler Building? The Chrysler Building. And I was like, okay. And I knew it was wrong, but he was so on a thing. We're going to take you in, we're going to do this. We get into the lobby. First thing that happens, a guy says, can I help you? He says, isn't this the Empire State Building? The guy goes, no. But he could be very firm about things. The other thing that we used to joke about at home was, I said, it's a great thing you never, went and interviewed with the CIA or the FBI. You could never be a spy. I said, you enter the house, you leave a cupboard open, a sock here, your belt is over there, your shirt. I said, I always know where you are. I said, that's not, spies don't do that, just that. But I'm going to read just a couple more things, and then I think we can bring this to a close. In French, we don't really say, I miss you. It doesn't translate to, I miss you. It actually translates to something closer to, you are missing from me. Tu me manques, right? You are missing from me. Meaning you're a part of me because you're missing from me, right? You are essential to my being. Tu me manques. I am missing a part of you. You are part of me. You are like a limb or an organ or even blood. And without you, it's hard to function. So I love that. I speak some French, and I know some people here do as well, but when I discovered that it's, we'd like to translate things into idioms, but I feel like, you are missing from me is much more appropriate for Hide, for all of us today. Tu me manques, chérie. Let's see. I'm going to read a Buddhist blessing, and then just a few more comments. This watch was actually a wedding gift from some very thoughtful people. Hide and I got matching Seiko, of course, watches. I don't wear this anymore because, we've all graduated to the little computer on your wrist, beam me up, Scotty, that sort of thing. And this doesn't keep time as well as it probably should or could, but it doesn't really matter, and it reminds me of how my time with Hide will be timeless, and how he will never leave me. He's much too annoying to leave me forever, so I think that's important. As I said before, Lao Tzu said, being deeply loved by someone gives you strength, while loving someone deeply gives you courage. And today I'm using my courage to share this remembrance with you. Buddha said, in the end, only 3 things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. And right now, Hide's in a place that I'm not meant to be in, so I'm going to try my best to let him go peacefully. Peacefully. And here's my Buddhist blessing. May all beings be well and safe. May they be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether moving or standing still, without exception, whether large, great, middling, or small, whether tiny or substantial, whether seen or unseen, whether living near or far, born and unborn, may all beings be happy. I am absolutely certain that Hide would want you to have those feelings. I think for all intents and purposes, we are done. I want to thank you again for coming. And I want you to know personally, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I am so happy you're all here. That just makes my heart soar. And I know it would make his soar as well. And I know he's with us watching and laughing and saying, oh, you screwed everything up. But I know it's the thought that counts. And I thank you. Arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you very much. Arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you very much. And that concludes our memorial service. We do have some refreshments in the kitchen. There are some snacks and water and coffee and tea. And I hope you'll stay and join us, and we can talk more about beautiful Hide. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We can go, it's okay.